Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1743. The topic is mindset and the title is significance. Ooh. I had a client send me a text image, and it was of a billboard that had a phrase on it. And the phrase, like what it said, depended on how you looked at it, how you read the sign. You could either read from the top down or left right. So it either said, "You don't matter, give up," or "You matter, don't give up." And the client wrote with me with the text image, "Thank you for giving me the ability to control my perspective so I can read life in a way that builds both myself and my family." And I loved it. That was super awesome. Very nice. Thank you very, very much for that. But I went through and in our weekly document I have with all my clients, I wrote to them that, they're freaking crushing it and they're the motivator. They're the one that made it possible. They're the one that learned that perspective is a choice. The client has gone through a rough couple of years. So I've been working with them since 2019. They went through a job change, their own health issue, a family member health issue, and all of that was very impactful. But through it all, they've been through ups and downs with their nutrition and training, but they've always been trying. They've been engaged in some way. Some of the time with their nutrition, we've tracked, every single day, every single food, calories, protein, sugars, timing of carbohydrates and fats. But at other times, it's been, hey, I need you to eat 3 times a day with at least 30 grams of protein each time. And I gave them a list of foods, and I was, if you're on the go, you can find this at a gas station. You can find this at a grocery store. You can find this at a hospital, because they were there for a while. So we talked about that. But that's the range that it's been. With their training, sometimes it's been 4 workouts a week, and they've been asking me for a 5th. Sometimes they haven't even made it to the gym, and we're setting 10-minute timers and just doing push-ups, sit-ups, and squats at home. Through the mess, they've been either fully engaged or, as they said, this is a quote, "as least engaged as a person can be while still technically engaged." Which I thought was fantastic. So as little as somebody could be doing it, that still counts as doing it, is what they were doing. And that's what we've done, but through it all, they continued. At times they struggled with whether or not their nutrition and their training, their health mattered, given everything else that was going on. They had a couple times in their journal that, quote, they asked the question, "Does it even matter?" We discussed that feeling, and we came to a conclusion that everything matters if we use it. Everything matters if we use it. They felt better when they ate well. They felt better when they trained often. And when they felt better, they gave better. Their health mattered not only for their happiness, but for the happiness of those around them. And as the hospital bills and some other things were coming up, they realized that it helped towards financial security, not only for their relationship with their spouse, but also for their kids. One of the quotes from their journal is, "If I'm in better shape, I cost less long term." They realized if they're in better shape, they cost their spouse less collective money, and they're going to cost their kids less money. So that was something we really discussed. That was something they really struggled with, was significance. I brought up a concept that I had heard from Jordan Peterson, who's wrote some really good books. I would definitely check out his books. I think it's 12 Rules for Life and Beyond Order. There was he wrote 2 really good ones, and I wish I would have looked up those titles before I said his name. But Jordan Peterson, Peterson, you can look him up. And one of the concepts he talked about that I then shared with the client was when you ask the question, does it matter? We have to consider context. So does our life matter? Does what we do matter? Does my client's nutrition and training matter? If we look in the scope of all of the history of time, say 13 billion years, no, probably not. Like today's podcast, probably not going to matter, in the history of all time. If we look in the scope of all of the population of the world, which I don't even know what it is right now, 8 or 9 billion, probably not. So the scope we look at can be very defeating, but it's also not really relevant. What I do today doesn't need to matter to all of the history of time. It doesn't need to matter to all of the population of the world for it to actually matter. We want to look at scopes, amounts of time, people of influence that do matter, that are relevant. So what's a relevant scope of time? Your lifetime. Your kid's lifetime. The next 10 years. Today. What's a relevant scope of influence? Your connections. Literally every single person that you come in contact with in a day. Your family. Yourself. What matters is what you decide what matters because of how you use it. How will you use what you do to make the world, your world, the world around you, better? That's what matters. If you use what you do to make your life better, to make the ones around you, their life better, that matters. That absolutely matters. You matter because you have that influence. You have the power to decide to make a difference with what you do. I shared with a client that the reason why I actually started the podcast was I was going through a rough patch, emotionally, mentally, and I was struggling with whether or not what I did mattered. Did it really matter? So I started the podcast because I wanted to just kind of reach more. Like I wanted to reach beyond 4, 5, 6 people a day. I loved that I was able to help 4, 5, 6 people a day. If that's what my training day looked like, or 10, 12 people, whether it be, very beginning of the gym when I was training 60 plus hours a week. I loved it. It was meaningful, but through that low period of time, I was going through, kind of relationship things and whatnot, and it was just a struggle to find more significance to make the struggles more worth it, if that makes sense. And I got invited to be a guest on a podcast, and I was like, man, I really like that. It was super fun just to kind of chit-chat about what I knew, and maybe it helped somebody. Maybe it helped somebody that I wouldn't normally be able to help in person. Through the podcast, I have not reached 1 million people. But to the people I have reached, I hope it's made a difference. So I have to find a scope that is relevant for me. I don't need to reach 1 million people for it to make a difference. I do want to reach someone. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm glad when people listen to the podcast. That's the goal. Can today's podcast, can this podcast, just in general, the whole podcast, the 1,743 episodes, can it make a difference in someone's life? And in doing the podcast, it made a difference in my life. I got remotivated. I kept focused on my job, on my clients, kept the gym open. I kept improving myself to become a better person, to see how I could better communicate with others, how I could have better influence, just how I could be better. And that let me become a better person, that I eventually met my now wife and was great in character enough that she married me. So that's awesome and a huge blessing and a surprise. I have good family connections. I have a successful career. Very, very blessed, very blessed, very blessed. Thank you to all of you. I have a fire every morning when I wake up to get up and just crush my day. I am actually excited to go to work. I love my work. I love what I do. And it's because I decided what would matter in my life. And then I acted on it and I used it. That's what I did to make myself matter. That's what my client did to make themselves matter. And so can you. When the client referenced how they read situations based on their now ability to recognize and control their perspective, you can do the same. Wherever you find yourself, find anything that's good. My wife and I joke about, you might have heard the phrase silver lining. Find the silver lining in things. And I have jokingly called that the sliver lining because sometimes they're pretty damn small. We actually had podcast 1527. I talked about sliver linings as a joke. But it's a very important thing to try to find the good things. If you can't find good things, and also if you can, find what you can influence. Find where what you do can make a difference. That can give you meaning. That can give your life, that can give what you do significance. So when you read the sign of life, like the client that sent me that sign, I hope you read it in a way that doesn't say, you don't matter, give up. I hope you read it in a way that says, you matter, don't give up. If there's anything I can help with, if you have any questions, reach out. Our email is brutalironjim@gmail.com. If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. If you like the podcast, please consider donating to support the podcast, which you can do on our website. If you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Jim. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.